Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us once more on One Simple Step today, an interview about ECV, External Cephalic Version. That is the process that is attempted by doctors when a baby is breached or transverse to allow a woman to have a vaginal delivery. So today, Debbie Bauman has experienced this with her second delivery just 3 weeks ago. And we have the privilege of having her share her experiences and compare and contrast her first delivery to her second. So welcome, Debbie, and thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Heather.
So Debbie has had quite the contrast between a first and second delivery, and I just love how she shares her story. She had Theo 3 years ago, and then Olive just 3 weeks ago. So Debbie, let's jump in, and you just explain how your delivery and the end of your pregnancy really with Theo went.
Yeah, of course. So with Theo, my first pregnancy, I was originally planning to have a home birth. So I had been doing all my prenatals with a home birth company that was close by to my house. I was doing all of my checkups there. I even was doing prenatal yoga there as well and had an awesome experience. But unfortunately, last minute, my insurance changed where originally it was 100% covered, my home birth. And then when it switched, it did not cover it at all. So within a month and a half, I needed to find a hospital, a doctor that would take me so late in my pregnancy as well. And then also just mentally having to kind of process that whole change because I really wanted to have a natural birth. I wanted to have a home birth just in general, where it was cozy and warm and inviting. And I was envisioning that the whole time, and having a last minute change really threw me off. And I was really angry about it. I was kind of mourning
Definitely.
that change as well. And my mom was helping me find a hospital. And I was literally, as we were walking, getting a tour of the hospital ward, I was just so mad. And I didn't want to be there. And I told my son in my tummy, I said, Theo, you can stay in there as long as you want. Which didn't make sense because he would have to come out eventually. But he listened. And we ended up finding a hospital that did have midwives because I wanted at least to have a midwife instead of a doctor. And we did find a hospital that would, take me in and have midwives, which was fantastic. And they also had a water birth option as well. So they had a tub in the room. But yeah, so Theo did not come as quickly, as we were expecting, because I told him to stay in there.
Yeah.
So 9 days after his due date, I had my first contractions. I didn't even have Braxton Hicks for his pregnancy at all. And so once we had the contractions, because I was so late, we went to the hospital immediately. But I was only 1 centimeter dilated, and they knew that I didn't want to have an epidural or C-section or Pitocin, anything like that. So they were offering me all of the other like manual or other ways
Mhm.
of helping me progress and dilating. So first they did something, it's kind of like a hormone, like a little stick that they insert into your cervix. So they did that, did not help me. Then they did a balloon, which is literally like a manual thing they stick in your vagina or cervix, and they slowly blow it up or something to
Mhm.
manually open. And it was, for me, the most painful thing that happened. Later on, when I told a friend about it, they said, oh, they didn't give you any pain meds for that? They didn't tell you it was going to be painful? And I was like, what? Like, no, they did not. And my body was shaking from that. And it was very, very painful. And again, did not help me at all, which was very unfortunate. And just my whole experience with Theo's labor and delivery, coming in, I was already anxious and angry and kind of mourning the delivery that I wanted. So I had
Mhm.
all of those kind of negative feelings for it. And I wasn't happy about my new situation, and I wasn't adjusting well.
Mhm.
And I think with that mentally, my body just stayed closed because it wasn't
Most
relaxed.
definitely.
It wasn't excited, to deliver. But also what was unfortunate was the midwife's take on it was they also didn't help me relax and help me open up. So they didn't let me go in the water because they said I wasn't progressing fast enough and that would just slow me down, which now looking back, I probably would have progressed because I would have
Right.
relaxed. Um, they just in just the way that they talked, because I was so far along past my due date, they were just so nervous about things of me slowing down and all of that. So overall, he ended up coming 11 days past his due date. And I still delivered, vaginally, which is what I wanted. They did end up giving me Pitocin, which I was so scared about because I
Hmm.
had heard that Pitocin, that it just makes your labor, your contractions really intense.
Hmm.
And I was just really scared. I honestly, looking back too, I think I was scared about the actual pushing part of the delivery. Um, of the whole experience. And I think that's what also my body just was like, no, let's not open. And so they ended up giving me Pitocin and then some sort of pain medication through my IV that helped me relax and finally open.
Uh-huh.
So I think I ended up having like a 52-hour labor.
Oh,
But again, that's not active labor the
right.
whole time, but I was in the hospital for that long of a time. So for my very first contraction. So I know the active labor is really different time wise, and I don't know what my length was for that, but um, that was my first birth. He ended up coming vaginally, which is what I wanted. No epidural, no C-section, but still not as positive of an experience as I wanted. So that was my first birth.
So, what did you do differently with this one? I know that you've had a lot of contrast. So, what did you intentionally do to prepare yourself for this delivery?
So for this one, I wanted it to be completely different and a much better experience. So I was looking online, for like a positive birth, things like that. And I ended up stumbling on um, a program or a website called the Positive Birth Company.
Wonderful.
And later on, maybe when I give some tips on, first time moms, I'll mention that too.
Uh-huh.
It's called the Positive Birth Company .co or something, or maybe .org. I'm not sure. But it was fantastic. She has YouTube videos. She has a book. I ended up buying the digital pack, and essentially what it is hypnobirthing, which it sounds kooky, but it's not. It's all about breathing and controlling your contractions and controlling your kind of your mental state, honestly, to stay in control during that time and not
Hmm.
lose it. And so I started reading that and going through it with my husband as well, actually, so that he was on the same page, because
Wonderful.
he knew that I wanted to have a totally different experience. So we had to be a team, because that was the one positive thing with my first labor and delivery, was that we labored really well together. I know that
Uh-huh.
sounds strange. The man obviously is not having contractions, but he was so supportive, and I had a lot of back labor, so he had to like push on my lower back every time I had a contraction. He had to tell me, like, relax your head, relax your shoulders, relax your knees, relax your ankles, every contraction. So we were really a good team when we labored that first birth.
Uh-huh.
And so for the second one, we also wanted to have a good, team vibe, I guess you would say.
Right.
So we went through this hypnobirthing thing together. And as I was reading it while I'm pregnant, I've realized all the things with my first birth that could have gone differently, of, having, even having the lights dimmed low.
Yes.
Um, and when people come into the room, to not be talking really loudly, having me let me labor in the water, like things like that, that I now looking back and reading the hypnobirthing stuff, I was like, oh man, those midwives, they could have helped me progress with all these other things.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to make sure that was really different for this birth. So for this birth, I made sure that we were walking through all of that together. I hired a doula for the second time, because for my first birth, my husband was there and my mom was there. But at the time, my parents lived overseas. And so my mom, for that first birth, It's so ridiculous. But so she had her flight. She was visiting for, I think, 3 weeks, a week before the due date, the week of, week after. And by the time we were at the hospital and I was in labor, she had to leave and get her flight back to her home country. I think she left at 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. And Theo was born the next day at 5 a.m. So she literally missed his birth by
Oh,
12 hours. And in those 12 hours, the moment she had to leave, Michael and I, my husband and I, we felt so alone at the
mm,
hospital. And just, I felt extra overwhelmed of,
right.
I need an extra person. And also my husband, he was tag teaming with my mom of doing the back labor, pushing on my back, helping me. Because it is really exhausting for that support person. People
Right.
don't realize, like, my husband needed to take a nap, which sounds, some
Mhm.
wives might think that's silly, but honestly, it's really needed. It actually takes a toll on them as well. So when my mom left, we felt so alone that I actually ended up calling my best friend that lived 10 minutes away from the hospital. She came and was kind of like a mini doula in a
Right.
sense. She was there. She massaged my calves for me with some lavender oil and just helped me relax. But she was only there for a few hours and she had to go home to her kids. So the second time around, we really wanted to have a doula for that support, to give my husband that break,
Hmm.
and also just have another person to be able to ask questions and, just to have, yeah, just to be able to have that support.
Hmm.
Because and they're not a midwife. They don't have the technical, like, medical, um, they can't deliver my baby or anything like that, but it's just really helpful for us during that time.
So, if there were, what would be 5 things that you did differently this second pregnancy in
Mm,
preparation? What would you say?
okay.
Or you,
Yeah. So, some things that we did differently for the second one is we hired a doula to have that
mhm.
emotional support for sure. And it was great because she was also on board with things like essential oils, things that I really, that I used at home. I actually used lavender oil. I diffused it at the hospital for my first birth as well. I brought my diffuser, I brought my oils with
Yes,
me
yes.
for that first birth to try to help me relax as much as possible. And so she was also on board with that, and she did that. And honestly, she kind of helped with a lot of the changes. So when we hired her, she brought all of her oils with her. She made sure that the lights were dimmed. Whenever someone came in and they were speaking loudly, she would ask them to, come in a little bit quieter, which honestly, it didn't happen that often, but the couple times it did, it was so wonderful to have her kind of be that, almost like that
Go.
shield, so that
Hmm.
my husband and I didn't have to ask that and didn't
Correct.
have to put ourselves in an awkward position in a way,
Hmm.
and we could just focus on the labor. And she was kind of that shield for us to say, hey, can you guys talk a little bit quieter? Can we keep the lights dimmed? Can we turn the AC on or turn the AC off? Things like that. It was just so nice to have that other person deal with that for us.
Right.
Um, and she was so fantastic. She gave me shoulder massages to help me relax. She walked in the hallways with me. So honestly, the biggest thing that I would say to anyone is to hire a doula if you
Hmm.
can, if you can afford it. Um, the second thing is we were just more prepared mentally,
Hmm.
emotionally. We were excited. Um,
Yes.
every every time when I was at home when I was pregnant, and I would have like a little bit of a hiccup of, oh, I'm nervous for the contractions, or
Right.
I'm getting nervous for the labor.
Right.
My husband would just say, we're gonna have an awesome birth. We're gonna get to meet our baby girl in the end. It's going to be an amazing experience. Like, he was just so positive and bringing me back to thinking positively for it. And that really helped. So honestly, doing hypnobirthing beforehand, and doing it with your partner, doing it with your spouse is, I
Hmm.
think, huge, so that you're not alone, that they
Right.
know exactly you're on the same wavelength, all of that. Um, and with that, having an open mind is
Yes.
another thing that I had to change too, because with my first birth, because I was so uptight about not wanting epidural, not wanting any medication. I had to go through all of those painful, at least for me, painful manual ways of dilating, and it
Mm-hmm.
didn't work for me. Whereas with this one, I still was not planning to have an epidural. I still didn't want a C-section, and all of that. But when the time came, where, and we'll talk about the ECV as well, but they did give me Pitocin,
Mm-hmm.
and I was okay with that. And I had an epidural. They had given me an epidural for the ECV, and they just kept it in my back, so that in case I wanted a C-section or something, it was already there.
Right.
And in the end, after I contracted for a while, I was like, you know what? I think I do just want to do an epidural. Like, I think my labor is going to be really long if I don't do it. And I'm okay with changing my plan and mentally being okay with that. I'm not letting myself down. I'm not, ashamed for doing an epidural and not going completely 100% natural. And honestly, having an open mind was another huge change, from the first birth to the second birth.
Definitely. So you were
Um,
very prepared, you're very positive, and you're very open-minded.
yes.
And I think also, what were the words that you were even saying to Olive, which were different than Theo? Theo, you said, stay in here, as long as you want. But were you saying to Olive?
So for Olive, I was telling her that she could come whenever she wanted. And I didn't want to specify, come on your due date,
Right?
because I think the actual percentage of women delivering on their due date is really small.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know that some women can get frustrated with that if the due date passes and nothing happens. And so I just told her, you know what, you can come whenever you want. If you want to come early, you can. If you want to come on your due date, if you want to come late, regardless, we're going to be ready when you are, which was very different with Thea. With my first was, you stay in there as long as possible. So,
Yes.
yeah, it was totally different. And I was just so much more relaxed with the second one.
That's incredible. So if we can help women, especially with their first deliveries, the unknowns, if we can do some of these things, it can make a big, big difference. So
Yes.
your open-mindedness was really tested, because about at 38 weeks and 3 days, you
Mm-hmm.
went in and found out that Olive was transverse. So her head wasn't up full breech. It was just transverse this way. And again, we want ideally head down. And so one of the options is the external, which means outside, cephalic, which means head first, and version, which means turn. So that's when the doctor actually manually tries to turn the baby. The reason for this is to allow a vaginal delivery and avoid a C-section. So the success of this is about a 58% success rate. That was from a study that was just put out actually last month. And just to give you another couple of stats about breech, babies at 28 weeks, there's about a percentage. Anyways, there's more at 28 weeks, but many of those change positions, and usually there's only about 4% that are actually breech at full term, or around 38 weeks. So this happened to Debbie, and she found out this news. She had been preparing so great. She's looking forward to this, and then this. So how did you change mentally, and how did that journey go?
Yeah. So when I found out, they were doing an ultrasound, which is how they found out. And I know some people, they end up getting a lot of ultrasounds during their pregnancy, and some get very few. For some reason, I was getting, I think that was my fourth one at the time. I don't know why. I wasn't high risk or anything, but they just were ultrasound happy. So, but it was great because
Yeah.
we found out that, our baby wasn't head down. She was transverse. So she was laying down on her side, nice and relaxed. But what the ultrasound tech said immediately was, oh, your baby is not head down. You'll probably get a C-section. That's probably what your doctor will tell you, is that you'll need to get a C-section. If I had heard that for my first pregnancy, I probably would have panicked and stressed and got anxiety way faster.
Mm-hmm.
With this one, I was just, after she said that, I said, okay. I was totally relaxed, did not panic. And I was, in my mind, I was like, well, we'll see what the doctor actually says, because you're just the ultrasound tech, that's your opinion. And so we went into the doctor. And actually, my husband wasn't there. I was just there by myself doing my routine prenatal. And the doctor said, I know you don't want a C-section. So your options are, you can go home this weekend, try to do some different positions. And it was great. She actually showed me some different positions. She was so positive about me turning the baby, or trying to turn the baby
Right.
myself. Didn't jump to the C-section conclusion immediately. She said, we can try to, you can try to turn the baby yourself at home. But if that doesn't work, your options are, being this late in the game, is we can do an ECV. So where literally the doctor pushes on your stomach to turn the baby. We can do the ECV, or we will have to do a C-section, because there's a lot of risk for having the baby being birthed breech or sideways or transverse. It has been done, but there's just a really high risk of like the umbilical cord coming out first. And if that happens, it's really risky for the baby and the mom, things like that. And so I was like, okay, I'll try to turn the baby at home. And if that doesn't work, then I'll call you guys and we can figure out what to do next. So I went home, and pretty much all weekend, it was actually Mother's Day weekend. So we didn't really celebrate anything for that, which was fine. And the doctor had told me, go on your knees and have your butt kind of up in the air and your head on the ground. And you can do it on a couch too. And you can look up different videos on how to turn your baby at home. I was doing all of that as much as possible without getting dizzy with my head. But nothing was working. And so, but I wasn't really, I kind of had a little bit of a hiccup at one point of, oh boy, like we're going to do this ECV thing. I hope it's not scary. Maybe I should try acupuncture or something extra. But honestly, I didn't have that time. And so I called the doctor on Sunday evening, and it ended up, a different doctor ended up taking over my case, or my pregnancy labor at that point, because my doctor didn't have a lot of experience with ECV, and the head doctor of the hospital did. And so he actually took over me. And so he ended up calling me that evening and talking to me about my options. And he said, come in tomorrow. We'll do another ultrasound again. So I had all these ultrasounds. We'll do another ultrasound just to see if you were able to turn the baby at home, even though I could just feel around. It was pretty much the same spot. And he said, if the baby hasn't turned, then you can just hang out at the hospital. And in the afternoon, we'll do the ECV. We'll start the process, and you'll probably stay at the hospital. We'll induce you, because we don't want, if you go home, there's the risk of the baby turning back to transverse, because there's a reason why she's laying that way. She's probably more comfortable. So she might flip back. And, since you don't want a C-section, we don't want her to flip back. So I would recommend you staying at the hospital. We induce you, and you deliver the baby within the next couple of days. Again, because I've been doing the hypnobirthing and using my brain, there's kind of this thing that they have with hypnobirthing of, you think about your options, your risks, the positives, the negatives, things like that before you make a decision. And I was just weighing all the things that he had said. And my husband and I, we both decided, what, it's okay if we get induced, because I really don't want a C-section. It's okay if they give me Pitocin. Again, things that originally I would have never wanted. And even with the ECV, he said, we could do it without any pain medication, but with that, it would be very painful for you. And because it's painful, you would actually be tensing up your stomach. And that would make it harder for us to turn, and the success rate would be much lower. Whereas if we give you an epidural, it would relax you. We won't give you a high dosage or anything, just enough that it will relax you, and we'll give you another medication to just really relax your abs. so that we can turn the baby and have the higher success rate. And so I said yes to all of that. I was totally comfortable doing that. And so on Monday, we went in, we had our bags packed already. We had our son go to our friend's house, for that next week, because we told them about the transverse and the ECV. And we went in to do our ECV.
Wonderful. So you were really prepared. You knew all of your options.
Yep.
And you were really open to whichever was the best for you and the baby, and were prepared. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you went in, and how did that go?
It was great. It sounds so strange, but so we went in the morning, did the ultrasound. She was, still not turned, but we brought like our computers, because again, I wasn't in labor or anything. So we went in, we watched a TV show, but then we were like, oh, we should probably sleep as much as possible, because if we're inducing, we're going to be really tired in labor. So we did sleep a lot too during the day, because our doctor wasn't available until the afternoon. So we kind of had to just hang out there, and because we just didn't want to commute all the way home and back. So we just hung out at the hospital, and we had our hospital bag already kind of packed, and we had everything with us, so we weren't stressed in that way. Whereas, and even going to the hospital, I even told my husband, I was like, this is actually so nice going in a taxi and not having contractions in the car, when you're driving, like, because I didn't have any contractions. So it was really comfortable going to the hospital. It was really, just really nice. So when it was time for the ECV, they brought in, the anesthesiologist to put in the epidural. And for some strange reason, they wanted my husband and my doula to leave the room. I don't know why. I don't know if that's a normal thing, because again, I've never experienced this, but that was kind of strange because I had never done an epidural, so I didn't know what to expect. But they put it in eventually. They had a little bit of trouble at first. And that was another thing, was I was so scared of epidurals, because what I had thought from my first birth and pregnancy, what I had read about things or heard from other people, was if you get an epidural, you're just paralyzed from the waist down. You can't feel anything. You're totally numb. And that was not the case at all for me. I was able to still feel my legs. They just felt really heavy. And it just had a different sensation. Like when the blanket was on my legs, it just felt different, but I could still feel things. So that was another thing that I was really surprised and happy about, that I wasn't, numb completely.
Right.
And once that kind of kicked in, the doctors came in, the nurses came in, and they told me that they had the C-section room, the emergency C-section ready to go, just in case something happened, which again would have normally scared me, but I was like, this is great. They're prepared. This is wonderful. Let's do this. And it was two doctors. The experienced doctor was telling the other doctor where to put their hand, and he was going to say 1, 2, 3, and they were going to push the baby into position, head down. And it took 2 seconds.
That's incredible.
They just flipped the baby. And after the epidural, my husband and doula came back into the room. And so they were there for the ECV part. And my doula was so shocked that it was done, because she had been present at other ECVs where they flipped the baby. And she said, sometimes it would take them at least half an hour, and I'm sure that's because if they were fully breech, if they were totally head up, it was probably much more difficult. But because my baby was sideways, it was a shorter journey. And so it just took 2 seconds. It was incredible. So fast. And then they bound up my tummy. They put like this wrap around just to keep the baby in place so that she wouldn't move back.
Right.
And it monitored me. They actually gave me some Pitocin. So that was around, I think 6 p.m. or something like that is when they did it, or 7. And they gave me Pitocin just for a few hours, just to kind of help my body start contractions and start labor. But that was really nice. They actually turned off the Pitocin for the evening, so that I can get some rest, and also for my body to naturally contract, because they didn't want to do Pitocin the whole time. And they did very, very low dosage, which again, with my first pregnancy or first birth, I did end up getting Pitocin, but I was so scared for
Hmm.
the Pitocin. I had heard that it's really intense. You don't get any rest, all of that. And that was not the case for the second one. They did a very tiny, tiny dosage, and it was just to help encourage my body to start, because at that point I was a week before my due date.
Right.
And so my body was just not ready, or, wasn't
Yeah.
planning on doing labor that soon. So, I was able to kind of rest. I did have contractions naturally for a couple hours, but then they petered off and I slept. And then in the morning, they started off the Pitocin again, just to, start inducing me.
Excellent. What were all the different positions that you labored in? Because I know you wanted
Yeah.
that too.
Yes. I wanted to just have, I didn't want to be stuck on the bed.
Hmm.
And so, after the ECV, the epidural was kind of, um, it had turned off, or I
War.
don't know what to
Hmm.
call it,
War off.
wore
Uh-huh.
off. Yeah, the epidural had worn off, but they kept it in my back just as a
Very good.
backup for, if I ended up wanting it later on, or if I did, have an unplanned C-section, I had it ready to go. So they did keep that in my back, which at first I didn't want, because I thought it would bother my back, but in the end, I mean, they just tape it, so it doesn't really bother you.
Mm-mm.
Um, and so I just had that in there, but it was so great. I was able to labor. The hospital that I was at, they were very positive with, you can labor in whatever position you want. You can
That's
deliver in whatever position. Even my doctor said, he's like, I've delivered babies in every position except for a handstand. So if you want to do a handstand, that will cover all my bases. But they were just so encouraging with, they had the exercise ball, they had a
Mhm.
pizza ball, they even had a yoga mat. So if I wanted to go on all fours on the ground, they had what is it, like a bar or something that you
Squatting
can,
bar. Uh-huh.
yeah, like a
Or
squatting
birthing
bar.
ball. Hmm.
Yeah, so that you can have it on the bed even, or on the ground. They did not have a birth stool,
Uh-huh.
um, but they had everything. It was so nice. And so, what I ended up doing, what was most comfortable for me, was being on the exercise ball and leaning kind of forward.
Uh-huh.
And either my doula or my husband would put, actually what they did was they did a heat pack on my lower back, which I loved. For me, I really liked that.
Uh-huh.
Um, they also had a rebozo, which I
Yes.
never used before. It's essentially a long piece of fabric that you can use to, like, wrap around your tummy, and the other people they'll hold the fabric for you and either tighten it while you're contracting to kind of help with the pressure, or I can go on all fours and they can tighten it, and it will kind of alleviate, like, the weight of the baby and move even the baby around. So they ended up doing that as well for me, which I did like. But honestly, my favorite was just being on the exercise ball, having the heat pack and counter pressure on my back, and breathing with my husband. It was so wonderful, just breathing together and doing the hypnobirthing together.
That's great.
Um, I had I had the hypnobirthing. They had some, like, positive affirmations, like, audio
Oh,
recordings
great.
that I got
And that
on my
was from
phone.
the website.
Yeah, that was from the website. It was fantastic. And they had it with music, without music, or they just had music if you didn't want any words,
Wow.
um, things like that. And for that, that's another thing, is I brought my phone with those audio files, and I brought a speaker and wireless headphones. That is
Okay.
another tip I say to bring, is wireless headphones, because if you do want to listen to music, but you don't want everyone else to listen to it, or you want to listen to positive affirmations, um, having headphones with wires could get really messy.
Right.
And then you have to hold your phone or whatever you have it tied to, and you have IVs maybe going. It's just one less thing to be carrying around. So having wireless headphones was a huge bonus for me. I ended up using just my phone too, and that way my husband can also hear it, and we can be doing the breathing together.
That's great.
Um, Another thing, my doula was fantastic, and she gave me shoulder massages and back massages with essential oils. And we had, the essential oils going in the room. Whenever I would get these weird heat flashes.
Uh-huh.
And so my doula had a spray. I think it had just peppermint oil in it.
Yes.
And I would spray that on my chest, and that just helped, and on my neck. And that helped me cool down really fast, which was wonderful. And we walked around in the hallways. We did that a lot too. So those were just some different ways that I labored during the process.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And then how did things progress that day then?
Yes, it was just so wonderful. I don't it's just so it was just such a different experience because even though I was contracting, it was just so empowered. Like I just felt so empowered with this birth and with this labor. So even though I was going through pain, I was like, you know what? This contraction, it's only for 1 minute. Then I get to rest for a couple more minutes. And it was just so nice. Just everything that I had read before was really empowering. And so I ended up laboring for about from 7 in the morning until I think 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
Uh-huh.
Um, and again, just from my previous labor experience and even talking to my mom and my sisters who have also had kids, um, and hearing their labor experience and their birth experience, that's another tip is, talk to the other women in your family of what their labor length is or what it was, because most likely you actually will have a similar experience.
Mm-hmm.
And with my family, we had very long labors.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the doctors told me, well, this is your second baby, you will have a much shorter labor, so be prepared. I knew that probably wasn't the case because my mom had 6 children, and even
Uh-huh.
by the 6th child, she had very long labors, unfortunately. So I knew that wouldn't be the case, so I didn't get very excited about the short labor because I knew it probably wouldn't be true, and I
Right.
didn't want to get my hopes up. But by that 3 or 4 in the afternoon, I was like, do I really want to labor this long? I don't think so, and by then it really was getting painful.
Right.
Um, and I had the epidural in my back. They already had the little thing in there.
Uh-huh.
And I just made the decision. I said, I think I'm okay with getting an epidural.
That's
It's
beautiful.
okay. And I know from when they did the ECV, I'm not numb all the way. I can still
Mm-hmm.
feel it. And so I made the decision to get an epidural, and I felt good about that decision. I didn't feel bad about it. I didn't feel like I was letting myself down of wanting a totally natural, vaginal delivery. I just felt really good about it. And so I think within an hour, I got the epidural going, or no, maybe it was a couple hours. I'm not sure. But once I got the epidural, and that's another thing. By then I was only at, I think 2 centimeters.
Right.
And so even though I had labored all day, I had not progressed, similar to my first birth.
Yes.
All the things that I was doing, even though it was very positive labor, I was doing all the different positions and using oils, I still hadn't progressed. And so, but once I got the epidural, within 2 hours, my body was pushing. My
Wow.
husband was sitting there, my doula was sitting there, no one else was in the room except for us 3. And when I had a contraction, my body was pushing. I was pulling my knees up. And my doula was like, Debbie, you shouldn't be pushing right now. Don't push. And I was like, no, my body is I'm not trying.
Right.
My body is doing this naturally. She said, oh,
Wow.
okay. So she ran into the hallway, told the nurses, and they all started running in and, making all this noise. So she was our great shield saying, hey, please calm down,
Right.
come in quietly, this is happening, but please come in quiet. So she was fantastic in that way. And so they all came in, the doctors, the nurses, all of that. They checked me, and sure enough, I was at 10 centimeters within 2
Wow.
hours.
Wow.
It was incredible. And that also helped me feel really good about my decision of, okay,
Right.
if I had done this without an epidural, I probably wouldn't have progressed, and it could have gone downhill from there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with the epidural and making that decision, it was just very empowering. I felt really positive, and I was able to start pushing within 2 hours. So
That's great.
crazy. And even with the pushing, I had wanted to, and that was another thing with the hypnobirthing, was I wasn't trying to envision my birth of like what position I would be pushing in. And I had envisioned being on my knees and having my hands against the back of the bed.
Uh-huh.
So I still envision myself on the bed, but I wanted to somehow like push on my knees or something. And so my doctor said, you can do that. Yes, you have an epidural, but you're not bound to being on your back. If you want to labor, again, in whatever position you want to, but as long as you're on the bed, because my legs are weak with the epidural.
Right.
And he said, I wouldn't want you to fall or something to happen on the ground. You can, do whatever positions, if you want hands and knees on the bed, if you want to like be on your side with your leg up, whatever you want, as long as you're on the bed. So that was really nice that he gave me that freedom. So I did try the position that I wanted. And it was so wonderful. Like my doula was coaching me. The midwives that were there were also coaching me. My husband was there with like my breathing. Everyone was just like so positive, like you can do this, but the baby still wasn't coming out. So the doctor said, hey, like lay on your back, but like, let's pull your like legs up and let's see how this is. So even though it was on my back, I trusted my doctor with what he wanted. And again, I felt so supported by everyone around me. And so we did that. And I think it only took like half an hour from that point when I felt like pushing that the baby actually came. It wasn't that long, which again was not the case with my first birth. It was so crazy. But I think also just having such a positive, mindset, having such a positive team around me was amazing. And another fun thing, which I didn't expect I would enjoy, or I don't know what word to use, but the doctor said, hey, would you like a mirror to be able to see your baby come out? And I said, with my first baby, I like felt the baby's head when it was coming out, and that's enough for me. I don't think I want the mirror.
Yeah.
But then I was like, you know what? Sure. Let's just try it. Like, let's just, open-minded. Let's go for it. So my husband was actually standing next to the mirror so that he can adjust it, but then he can also have like, the full view. Because I asked him, I said, with the first birth, did you actually watch the baby come out? Like, I don't really honestly remember anything that's kind of like blocked out from that time. And he said, yeah, I did. And I was like, how was that for you? And he's like, it was fine. I mean, it was different. I, obviously I've never seen something like that, but it wasn't like gross or scary or weird. It was just really exciting. And so, but for the second one, he did say that it was, not more magical. I forget the word that he used, but he said it was different with this one, watching the baby come, because he knew what to expect. And it was just so cool seeing the baby come out of my body. And so, and it was for me too, it was so bizarre. I mean, when I was pushing, I could see the crowning and the head coming. But once I was actually pushing and the head and the body did come out, my eyes were closed because I was, pushing really hard. Right. But it was still really fun being able to do that. So again, if the doctor does offer that for someone, I would say try it. And if you don't like it, just close your eyes, look somewhere else. But at least you have an option. And it really was for me encouraging, because they would say, the baby's head is, it's crowning. I see the head, but I don't know that, but with the mirror, I could also see that. And it was so encouraging to say, okay, all this pushing isn't going to waste. There is progress happening. So having the mirror was a surprising, fun thing in that.
And it makes the body-mind connection even stronger.
Yes.
And empowers you, really. And encourages you, like you said. That's incredible. That's great. Yeah. Wow. And then you said at the end, she was delivered. Did she directly did you hold her right away? Was she doing okay? Or tell me about the placenta.
Oh yeah. So, it was actually funny. After I pushed and the baby was out, the doctor was like, the baby's here, pick it up, grab the baby, grab your baby. I was like, oh, okay. So he was very encouraging in that skin to skin, but also letting me be the first one to hold the baby.
Wow.
And so, I grabbed the baby. We did skin to skin for a little bit. The nurses, of course, they were like grabbing the towels and wiping her down, which I didn't really want, but whatever. And it was just so exciting having the baby on me. And same thing happened for my first. When he was born, I did grab the baby, or they gave me the baby immediately, and I did do skin to skin. So I did have a similar experience in that, which was wonderful. For the second one, which was interesting with delivering the placenta. With the first with the first pregnancy, delivering the placenta wasn't that hard. It was
Uh-huh.
painful, more painful than I think people realize it will be, because it
Right.
doesn't just fall out. You
Right.
actually do have to push and
Mm-hmm.
contract for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it came out much easier with the second one. It did not come out because last spring, so about almost a year ago now, a little
Mm-hmm.
over a year ago, I did have a false pregnancy kind of a thing. So I thought I was pregnant. I had the positive test, but I just had a placenta, but no baby inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went ahead and did a DNC. I forget what that's called, but essentially they just take it out for you
Mm-hmm.
instead of waiting for a natural miscarriage to
Mm-hmm.
happen. And so the doctor for this time, when the placenta wasn't coming out, and I never told this doctor, because again, he wasn't my original doctor, so he may not have known my history.
Right.
He said, did you have a DNC some, like, before this pregnancy, like
Mm-hmm.
recently? And I said, whoa, how did you know? I was like, actually, I did. I totally, I didn't realize it would affect the birth at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yes, because of that, sometimes there could be some scarring in the uterus,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes the placenta kind of be more stuck to the uterus and more difficult for it to detach and for you to deliver it. So he said, we'll try a little bit more, but if it still doesn't come out, we're going to have to actually manually take out your placenta, which I was like, what? Okay. I've never heard of it before. And sure enough, the placenta didn't come out. And during this whole time, I'm holding the baby.
Which
Um,
helps.
yeah. So, I still had that skin to skin time, which was really wonderful. But then what they had to do was, the doctor, and this was another doctor, she had to literally put her hand inside of me and very, very slowly kind of peel the placenta away from the uterus
Okay.
and pull it out, which was very painful. I still had the epidural, but it was wearing off at that point, because they gave me, again, like a small dosage of it. And so at that point, when she actually was going to go in, they said, hey, like, let's take the baby, or give the baby to your
Mm-hmm.
husband, just so you can focus on this. Um, so they did that. It was very painful, but they just really needed to take the placenta out, and then also make sure that they had the whole placenta, that it wasn't in pieces or anything
Right.
wasn't still stuck there. Um, and I'm kind of weird. I wanted to see my placenta. I did
Uh-huh.
it with my first as well,
Uh-huh.
which they were very kind and let me do that with my first. And even with this second one, I was like, oh, can I feel the umbilical cord before you cut it, and all of that. And they were very encouraged, helpful, in letting me do all this weird stuff.
Good.
So I just love medical things and organs and all of that.
Uh-huh.
So um, yeah, and actually my doula cut my umbilical cord for this one.
Uh-huh.
My husband did not want to cut it for either babies. I think he was kind of forced to with the first one, from the nurses, but this
Uh-huh.
one he was like, oh, please, no thanks. So my doula actually cut the umbilical cord.
That's neat.
I kind of wish I did it myself, but whatever. Again, I'm weird that way. But it was fun. So the doctor was so wonderful. He brought the whole placenta to me, and he was showing me all the different sides and all the different things. And so it was really fun getting a little bio lesson there.
Yeah.
But yeah, they ended up doing that. And they, checked the baby for everything, because after they do skin to skin, then they take the baby and, do all the typical, I don't know, like weighing them and seeing if they have all, 10 toes, 10 fingers, all that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. So
That's great. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Is there anything that you would share with a first-time mom, or even a mom having a second or a third?
yeah. Honestly, your mindset and your mental preparation is so important. It's the same importance as your physical. And honestly, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even do any exercise really beforehand. Even though they say that you should. I just didn't end up doing much, to be honest. I didn't do it with my first either. And I was okay with that this time around. With my first, I kind of felt bad, like, oh, I should be doing these prenatal workouts and be like this, like, fit pregnant mom. And no, that some people can do that, but not everybody, and it's
Right.
okay. I gained a ton of weight with my first baby, and that was okay. This one, I knew kind of pregnancy wise, what to control and, things like that. So I didn't gain as much, but anyways, um, I would say hire a doula if you can,
Mm-hmm.
or have a third person. So you're there, your partner, spouse, whoever is there, and have a third person. So it doesn't have to be a hired doula. I
Mm-hmm.
would recommend it someone that you feel very safe with, very comfortable. They're not going to add any anxiety to you, and that they'll be a support. Um, so have that third person there if you can. Another thing is, practice different labor positions or ways to manage pain before you actually go into labor. So
Mm-hmm.
do that with your partner, or again, with that third person, if you can, have a little party at your house and, practice, hey, like if I end up needing a lower back, help,
Mm-hmm.
let's do this massage or something. Or if I end up, needing my calves to be massaged. I needed that for my first one for some
Mm-hmm.
reason. They were kind of like spasming. So, like let's practice massage on my calves, things like that, like practice beforehand. I would say read hypnobirthing things or just even positive birth stories.
Mm-hmm.
There are even some other podcasts and things out there of positive birth stories.
That's beautiful.
And they're very different things. Like it could be, an unplanned C-section, or, it could be something like mine where you have an ECV that you weren't planning for. And
Mm-hmm.
just hearing different stories that, they either went exactly according to plan, which is very rare, or they turn out so different. It's so good to hear those different things so that, okay, if this happens to me, I've heard a story like this. And that's why I love your podcast, is it's kind of preparing people for that, of
Mm-hmm.
preparing them for the unknown. And okay, if there's some sort of fear that comes, how can I adjust and
Mm-hmm.
do that? And again, another thing is being open-minded,
Mm-hmm.
um, being willing for those changes. Um, Things to even, bring to the hospital, bring lots of snacks, bring audio things, like have a couple playlists that are either very calming or very upbeat. For my birth, once I actually started pushing, the doctor was like, "Oh, is there any song that you want to play? Like turn on some music, like let's get this party started." So I, told my husband like, "Oh, play this one song," like, so we ended up giving birth. I forget even what the song is called, but we delivered with music on, and it was just like a very positive, like party, things like that. So those are some of the tips that I would say for people.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Debbie, because this is so big. One simple step. We're taking steps towards healing and health. And part of that is being empowered through education and knowing what to expect. And I love all the things that you were saying, being prepared and open minded. And despite the changes in events, it still was very positive. So I think this is very powerful for women going in towards delivery. And thank you for sharing your story once again. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
I think that's it. Thank you so much for have this opportunity to share my story. It's very exciting. Once I had this positive birth story, I'm like, oh, I want everyone to know, that you can have a good birth experience, because everyone hears birth is scary, birth is painful, all of that. And you see that in movies all the time. You hear it from other women. Once you announce that you're pregnant, they just always want to tell you the horror
Right.
stories for some reason. And once I had this birth, I was like, oh, I want everyone to know that even though it went, unplanned, with the having the baby being flipped and having an epidural when I
Right.
didn't think I would, like, you can still have a wonderful experience.
Yes.
Not that I didn't have pain. I still had pain. I still had the horrible contractions, but it was a very positive experience. And I just want to share that with everyone. So thanks for letting me use this platform for that.
Most definitely. And thank you so much for joining us and listening in or watching today. And I hope that yours is also a very positive birth experience as well. Have a great day.